Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah?
This time we're going to be looking at Goodreads reviews
Okay.
and seeing what they might tell us about gender and reading.
Interesting.
So we've got mountains of data here, reviews, rankings, all that.
Wow.
And one of the most interesting things we found
Yeah.
is that there are some really interesting patterns in how men and women review books differently.
Okay.
Particularly across different genres.
Interesting.
So, we've all heard those stereotypes,
Right.
you know, men like this, women like that.
Uh-huh.
But does that actually hold up?
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch them all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
You know, we love to get our hands dirty with data, and you guys sent in a fascinating study that we just had to dig into.
200,000 Goodreads reviews analyzed to see if there are any gender patterns in what people are reading and reviewing.
And I gotta say, I was surprised by some of the results. Like, right off the bat, the study found that men are way more likely to be reviewing books on philosophy, comics, and politics.
Right, and that kind of challenges some assumptions, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Like, are we falling back on those old stereotypes about men being more logical and analytical?
Well, the stereotypes themselves are definitely worth questioning, but the perception of those fields as being more masculine, that's been around for a while.
So it's not necessarily that men are inherently more drawn to philosophy, but maybe because of who's been historically prominent in those fields, it just seems that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if fewer women feel encouraged to enter a field, then the existing perception just keeps getting reinforced. And we see that in other male-dominated genres, too. Like, how many classic sci-fi movies star mostly male characters?
Exactly. And that can impact not just who writes the stories,
Yeah.
but also who feels drawn to read and review them.
It's all connected. Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. Even though comics are generally considered a male-dominated genre, male reviewers actually prefer books by female authors within that genre.
Yeah, it's almost like a layer deeper than just men like comics.
So what could be driving that preference?
Well, we're moving into speculation territory here, but it could be that male readers in that genre are looking for more diverse voices, or maybe female comic authors are just bringing something unique to the table in terms of style and storytelling. More research to say for sure.
It makes you wonder if that trend is unique to comics, or if it's part of a larger shift with men being more open to reading stories by women across different genres. Maybe we'll see more evidence of that as we go through the data.
Well, let's look at the genres where women dominate the reviews. We see historical romance, contemporary romance, chick lit paranormal romance, all with a heavy focus on relationships and emotions.
Which does play into those classic stereotypes a bit, right?
Sure, but it's more nuanced than just stereotypes. Women are often socialized to value interpersonal connections and empathy. So it makes sense that those themes would be central to the stories they find engaging.
And let's be real, sometimes a little escapism is exactly what we all need, regardless of gender.
That's a good point. And this pattern goes beyond just romance. Women also dominate reviews for young adult and chick lit genres, where we often see strong female characters dealing with relatable challenges.
So how much of this is about inherent preferences versus what we've been exposed to or encouraged to read throughout our lives? And there's the whole connection to traditional roles, too. Women are also heavily represented in reviews for cookbooks and children's literature.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex web. Societal expectations probably play some role, but it's too simple to say that's the only reason women are drawn to those genres.
Right, there's got to be more to it than that. Okay, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, what about the genres that seem to have a more balanced mix of male and female reviewers?
We're talking genres like thriller, crime, mystery, adventure. All those fast-paced page-turners that keep you guessing.
I have to admit, I love those too. Why do you think those appeal to people pretty consistently across gender lines?
Probably because they tap into some pretty universal themes. Suspense danger, the satisfaction of solving a puzzle. Those are things that can capture anyone's imagination.
Yeah, there's just something inherently exciting about a good thriller, right? But even within those more neutral genres, I'm guessing there are still some subtle differences in how men and women approach the stories.
Oh, absolutely. Research has shown that even in genres like mystery and fantasy, female reviewers tend to put more emphasis on the relationships between the characters. They focus on the emotional depth, even when the main plot is about something else entirely.
So it's like women are bringing a different lens to these genres, valuing those emotional nuances even in stories that are usually seen as more action-packed.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what makes this so fascinating. It shows how our own individual experiences shape how we interpret stories.
Okay, I am hooked. Now let's get to the really juicy stuff. What were some of the most mind-blowing findings in this data? What really jumped out at you?
Well, that finding about male reviewers preferring female comic book authors, that one's definitely high on the list, especially since comics have historically been seen as a pretty male-dominated space.
It really does challenge those assumptions. So do you think this is specific to comics? Or could it be part of a bigger cultural shift with men being more open to stories from a female perspective?
It's a great question. It's possible it's just a comics thing. Maybe because that genre has become more open to diverse voices. But it also makes you wonder if it's a sign of something bigger happening.
Now, that would be fascinating. Okay, so what else did this data reveal?
Well, the next insight is a little more complex.
Yeah.
But equally interesting. It's something called gender confirmation bias.
Okay, that sounds intense. Break it down for me.
Basically, it means that reviewers tend to prefer books written by authors of their own gender. Men are more likely to give positive reviews to male authors, and women are more likely to do the same for female authors.
So it's like we're unconsciously gravitating toward voices we think are more like our own.
There's definitely an element of unconscious bias there, but it could also be that we genuinely connect more deeply with authors who we feel understand our experiences.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of, this author gets me, you know? They understand what it's like to be a woman in this world, or to be a man.
Exactly. And that speaks to the power of representation in literature. When we see ourselves reflected in the stories we read, it creates a sense of validation and connection.
Which brings us right back to those male reviewers who prefer female comic book authors. Could that be a sign that men are starting to recognize and value those unique perspectives?
I'd like to think so. It's a hopeful thought. It suggests we might be moving toward a more inclusive literary landscape, where gender doesn't dictate what we read or how we perceive a story.
Now that's a vision I can get behind. Seems like there's so much more to uncover here. We've barely scratched the surface.
You're right. We've only just begun to unpack the fascinating relationship between gender and reading.
Okay, so we talked a lot about the data, what it means, how it connects to bigger trends, but now I want to bring it back to you, the listener. How can you actually use these insights to make your own reading experience even better?
I think it comes down to becoming a more mindful reader. Being aware of those hidden dynamics and how they might be influencing your choices.
So it's like we're giving everyone a secret decoder ring for the world of books.
Exactly. And once you have that awareness, you can start to make more informed choices about what you read.
So what are some practical tips? What can we actually do to become more mindful readers?
Well, the first step is to just take a minute and think about your own reading habits. What genres do you usually gravitate toward? What kinds of authors do you tend to pick? Are you open to trying things that are outside your comfort zone?
It's all about that self-awareness, right? Recognizing those patterns can help us break free from any limits we might be putting on ourselves without even realizing it.
Right. And once you identify those patterns, then you can start to challenge yourself. Branch out a little. Try some genres and authors you wouldn't normally consider.
It's like stepping outside your comfort zone. You might discover your next favorite book that way.
And remember, reading is a personal experience. It's about what you enjoy. So don't be afraid to trust your own instincts. What one person loves, another might hate.
Yeah, it's like with music or food, everyone has their own taste. So just because a book gets rave reviews online doesn't necessarily mean you'll love it.
Exactly. Those 5-star reviews might be from people who just happen to have similar preferences to yours.
Yeah.
So take those reviews with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Read a sample chapter or two and trust your gut feeling.
Be an informed reader. Don't just follow the hype. And speaking of hype, let's talk about bestsellers and award winners for a sec. Those awards can be tempting, but they don't always mean a book is going to be a great read for you.
Sometimes those books are chosen for their broad appeal or their marketability, not necessarily for their literary quality.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in what everyone else is reading, but sometimes the best books are the ones nobody's talking about yet.
So don't be afraid to explore those hidden gems. The books that might not have won any awards but offer a really unique and rewarding reading experience.
There's a whole world of amazing books out there just waiting to be discovered. Okay, so we've talked about being more mindful, choosing books that really resonate with us, but what about the actual act of reading itself? Any tips for how to get the most out of that?
I think the most important thing is to just remember why you're reading in the first place. It's not about checking books off a list or impressing anyone. It's about the experience, the connection, the emotions those stories evoke in you.
Yeah, it's about getting lost in that world, letting the words transport you to another time and place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So embrace that sense of discovery, the thrill of the unknown, let the story unfold, and see where it takes you.
I love that, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've learned so much about how gender influences our reading habits in ways we might not have even realized.
And the best part is this is just the beginning. There's always more to explore and discover in the world of books.
So here's a final thought for you. What surprised you most about what we talked about today? And how might it change what you choose to read next? Happy reading, everyone.